Hello, Ayisha. Welcome to Do Good and Do Well, my podcast. We're back. How are you today?
Hi, Sarah. I'm really good, actually. I'm really excited. All of a
Good.
sudden, my nerves have
Yeah,
turned to excitement.
yeah. We were just saying, weren't we, that we were a bit nervous about doing this, but yeah, it's good. It's a conversation.
Amazing.
Okay, so first question. Can you start by telling us about yourself?
Yes, a little bit. Oh my goodness, there's always so many versions of me, I could say, and all of us, of course. But so keeping it simple, my name's Ayisha De Lanerolle. I founded the Conversation Agency some years back, late 90s it was, funnily enough. Um, and it was to create agency to empower people through creative and dynamic and collaborative conversation. And I suppose I've spent my time since then finding out just what those words can mean,
Yeah.
which is really great because it really changes. And it's interesting to think of what I thought that meant at the time. um, and then, should I tell you what I do?
Yeah.
Right,
Yes,
okay.
please.
I design, and I think this is part of it is rather than just having conversations. I mean, I see them as a powerful tool, and I think that we need to design them to
Mm,
really bring out their potential. If you're using them for a purpose, and I think that really focuses things at the same time so that you can open it up. Um, so I design and facilitate conversations. And again, the facilitation part is really important to me. You know, the first time I tried this, the kind of core of my practice, because it's facilitated, there's a process, there's a structure. I actually didn't know how to get in. I didn't know how to join in because I was thinking, this is weird.
mm.
You know, I was used to having conversations in pubs actually, and about something very specific in a very specific place or in the shop or whatever. And but I've come to see the power of facilitated conversation about really allowing the participants, because I do group conversation,
Mm,
allowing the people in the conversation to really work on the thinking
mm,
together and not have to worry about certain things. And I'm there to kind of hold the space in various ways, and to kind of help move things on. But so um, but I design it, help design, co-design, whatever people need before the facilitation,
mm,
and always slowing things down. I think that's a huge part. Slow things down. We
mm.
think fast. I mean, I think faster than I can write, which is why I've got such messy writing, handwriting. Um, so actually, slowing things down, it can bring you to a full stop sometimes because you're like, I'm not used to this. But gradually, you can kind of go, oh, well, you realize that you've got some space.
Mm,
So I use that metaphor a lot about making space, but it feels like space, and it is space in the sense there's more space between words often.
mm,
Not always. Sometimes people get very excited and speak quite fast, but then between speakers, so sometimes people don't speak at all. Because and then you ask them at the end, and I just went on this incredible journey of thinking around and about. Other people are listening intently to what others are saying. Some people get sparked off by an idea and then go, ooh, and on a journey and might report back a little bit at the end. It's a very strange process, I think, having conversations. So
mm,
actually creating a choreographed almost space is allows some different things to happen.
mm,
And for me, it allows it to fit into a lot of different settings.
mm,
And I think, you know, different and difference and diversity have to be made space for as well, which is part of the idea. It's philosophical. that is my practice. It's about, I didn't mention that before, my background is philosophical inquiry. So the idea is that you're getting back, revealing assumptions and looking at what else is possible and listening to other versions of the world, really, of how people see things and how they experience things. And then sometimes listening to yourself and going, oh, I wonder if it has to stay like that. So I think that's what I do. I create a space where people can begin to see things differently, maybe change their minds, not necessarily, but there's the freedom. And what else do I say about what I do? Well, I suppose I think the power of conversations is that you can actually transform relationships between people, but also our relationships to ideas, which also means then our opinions. And I think in this time of great sort of, well, we're so encouraged to have fixed opinions, to fix our opinions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we become so attached to them. They become part of our sense of identity. So I think in a space, I mean, there's lots of different ways people do it, but in the way, one of the kind of core of what I do, it is somewhere that you could put down some of those opinions, take them off, because in my practice, part of the safeness of the space is that we are not our opinions. Our value isn't in our opinions, which is quite a strange leap, or that's a strange thing to hold, actually, because I don't think that's how we are encouraged to be.
Yeah.
You're bad if you've got that opinion, and you're good if you've got that one. So if in this space, at least for the hour and a half or whatever that we're doing it, you can take off opinions and actually maybe experiment, it kind of gives you some space to listen in a different way, because you're not in a position of having to defend or attack, actually. And because in the training that I did, you have, part of it is that you have to agree or disagree. And you start off with a question, and then you agree or disagree. And people often feel uncomfortable about disagreeing and uncomfortable about making statements, because it seems like we believe something and we haven't thought it through or whatever. It's also giving something away, and it can feel exposing. So that often is my role as well, is to kind of encourage how someone can make a question into a statement, or vice versa sometimes. And just so we get a bit more agile with our thinking, and that we can actually live think, which sounds odd, because you think, of course, when we're thinking, it's live thinking, but it's so often prepared beforehand.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. I don't think I've made the connection. You and I've had many conversations. I don't think I'd made the connection between coaching and what you do. Like, what all those things you were just saying felt so familiar. And in coaching, we would maybe call it fresh thinking. There is fresh thinking that comes in that space. And as I'm hearing you speak, and the skill required to hold those spaces and to allow, because it like, I suppose, like a coachee coming to a session, if you haven't done it before, it can feel really alien and strange. And as you say, excuse me, we've got this, this sort of way that we've grown up, these systems and structures that tell us that we should be this or that, and we should have, I do think it's great if we have a point of view, because then you've got somewhere to start. But yeah, that skill that you're, in the way that you're holding that space, I'm really curious about how you came to this? Like what so you started in the did you say the late 90s? Like what was it?
Yeah, I did a philosophy degree, bachelor's, on many years ago, and loved some of it, and not other bits, um, and was frustrated that it didn't kind of translate to everyday life. Most people didn't seem that interested in that, whereas that
Mm,
was what I was interested in. How we think, how we, really how it affects how we operate in our lives, and then what the decisions we make. But a lot of people just saw it as a kind of academic exercise, and you pass your exams, and but also I find exams very hard. So the whole thing was actually um, not not a pleasant experience for me. Um, Apart from the social side, I loved.
mm,
But I found that philosophy wasn't what I was expecting. And then thought, I'm never going to do anything academic again. I really find exams difficult, hate being tested in that way. I'm out of it. And then 10 years later, I saw a program on television called The Transformers. It was a series called The Transformers, and one of them was called Socrates for 6-year-olds. And Dr. Catherine McCall, who I eventually trained with, was facilitating a philosophical inquiry with some 6-year-olds.
mm,
And they were talking about how do you know if there was a really fantastic robot made, how would you know? And it looked exactly like a human. It was sitting here with us. How would you know it wasn't a robot? Or it was a robot.
yeah, yeah.
And they were, I mean, it was quite mind blowing. And then I saw another person facilitating a conversation in I think it was a Washington kind of what had been a real sink school, secondary school, mostly kids of colour. And it had been a war zone, and they had a metal detector to go in, and the
Mm,
head teacher had taken it on and was turning it around. And part of that was to bring in practical philosophy, which I hadn't heard that term before.
yeah, can you say
And
what that is? What
well, I think it was about, applying philosophical thinking to everyday life, to our
mm,
lives, making it part of our lives, or making the awareness that we're philosophizing part of our lives. Because the thing is, and actually the practice, I mean, I think in the history of philosophy from ancient Greece, I mean, that I think it was about your lived life. That's Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. It was very much about this is this thinking is important, and he'd do it in the marketplace and
mm,
engage people and prod them and annoy them. And he had a particular process that I don't go out to prod and annoy people, but I definitely, seeing the place that inquiry has in our lives, but not in an academic way. I think that's what practical philosophy is. But so I was watching this guy doing a session with these kids in a school, and they were rocking on their chair legs and just like so disinterested. And gradually they realized that he was creating a space where they could speak, and
mm,
he saw it dawn on them. And then they were talking about justice, and he was helping them see that it hadn't all been decided, and what if they were in the conversation and they were in it now, and he wasn't telling them what to think, telling them how it is. And they just, I mean, they became animated, and it was really powerful moment. I literally held my breath, actually.
mm,
And I realized that's inspiration, that is, rather
mhm.
than that's inspiration, because I breathed in and I didn't breathe out for a while. And I was inspired, and I looked into training, and it was in Glasgow. It took me about 3 years to get there in the end, but I did a master's in an MPhil in something called Community of Philosophical Inquiry, which was some academic philosophy, but in the aim of training to facilitate anyone from the age 4
Mm,
upwards
mm,
in thinking about thinking. And, and I think it was the first time that I actually, I mean, I mentioned before when I first got to the university, most people had been doing it for a while, and I just couldn't get in. It was like this kind of roundabout that was going quite fast, and I couldn't jump on
yeah.
because you had to frame what you said. I agree or I disagree, and I was like, whoa! I was really unable to get on. It took me about 3 times. I mean, that was because they already were very familiar with it. I often do one-off sessions with people, and it's not like that,
Yeah.
There's lots of help for getting in, but once I got in, I realized it was the first time I'd begun to enjoy thinking in my life. And I did thinking lessons at primary school, and it put me off thinking forever. I thought I couldn't think. I came out
Thinking
of my
lessons.
thinking lessons thinking that I couldn't think,
Oh my
which is
What
a
are thinking
logical.
lessons? I've never
I
heard
know.
of
Well,
this
I
thing.
don't
What
know.
is
I've got a
this?
plot. Well, some of my friends, I do have a few friends from my primary school still, and they actually remember some of them. I don't remember. I think some of it was Edward de Bono, which is all about these different kind of thinking, different coloured thinking caps you can put on, and it would bring you into a different frame of
Okay.
thinking in a process. Um, I really don't remember. I just remember I found it very. Really, really hated it. And
Mm,
my conclusion from thinking lessons was Ayisha can't think.
yeah.
Now that is a logical fallacy because I was thinking that I couldn't think, but I didn't know that. It's only when I started doing philosophy that I realized, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. I was
Yeah.
thinking. So really simple things which are really useful to realize. Hang on, that doesn't work. There's a contradiction there. Bring some curiosity to it,
Yeah.
and then think it through. Live thinking, fresh thinking, and then you end up like going, "Oh, it's okay. I can think."
Yeah.
Something that might
Yeah.
seem
And I
obvious.
like it.
Yeah,
I like
and
thinking.
yeah, it took me many years, but I actually grew to really love it.
Yeah. Tell us more about, because I think when we first crossed paths, you were doing a project at Turner Contemporary with children and young people. And I know that that's part of your work, is about, how can we create these spaces where young people feel part of the conversation, like properly part of the conversation. Can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit more about that?
yeah, it was that was a wonderful period. I was the philosopher in residence. It kind of came about as opposed to from the beginning, I am the philosopher in residence. It started off with me sending a proposal before they actually opened to Karen Esley, who was the learning manager at the time, and to Michelle Gregson. And they, yeah, I said I could train your guides in the gallery
Mm,
in with a philosophical approach. And they said, "Oh, yes, please." We did a taster session with some teachers, and just to see whether people actually felt it was an accessible process. Um, and it was a 10-year residency. It was really great. So I kind of got involved in the learning, um, development of their learning approach, and
mm,
the conversations that front of house have with their visitors. So visitor engagement, it was really, and some public engagement projects as well with Trish Scott. It was really various, wonderful working with artists. And I think that
mm,
was I think I knew from the beginning that was where I wanted to go, through a path that involved art,
mm,
which is why I wrote that proposal to the gallery, obviously. But I, seeing that connection between artworks and artists who philosophize, they turn things around and up and down and
mm.
often confuse us. They're very rarely didactic. This is what you must think. They're
Yeah.
really provocateurs in all sorts of
Mm,
ways. I mean, that's contemporary artists. Some people don't like that. I think I enjoy it, and that was a lot of the focus of the work that I did with the gallery, was around encouraging young people to think,
mm,
finding
mm,
ways to think, enjoying hearing each other think. and really learning to listen and not assuming it. I've got it right, don't want to listen to you. So away from the debate, which has definitely got its place, but in a group it was very much about, okay, seeing sides and getting more agile. And we had the 5 year, it ran for 5 years, the Youth Navigators program, which was really wonderful. And they worked with me and an artist and the learning team. So we kind of moved from making activities to thinking activity, well, to, you know, separating them and joining them, because you can't really separate either of them, obviously. But yeah, kind of letting them realize I can go this way, I can go that way, and then I can connect them. And then we, with the Youth Navigators, we got them to practice. They used to come in for 4 days over a couple of months or a month, and the ultimate goal was they would go and approach a visitor, a stranger, and have a conversation with a stranger around the artwork. And that was really great, seeing them grow in confidence. They were like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But we kind of did quite a lot of peer stuff with them. And so the more confident ones would kind of, you know, then they all wanted to do it. It was really interesting watching the dynamics of like, oh, they're doing it, I'm going to give it a go. And that was, and you know, you saw them grow taller, literally stand taller. Just the experience of talking to adults who were listening. And it was, yeah, really exciting. And which then it was great. Karen Esley in the gallery went, okay, what next for young people? And they asked the question, what if young people started to actually impact on their local environment? So they started developing child-led programs, which I worked on as well, are inspiring change and pioneering places, you know, which actually, so pioneering places has ended up with, oh my goodness, I've forgotten his name, Conrad Shawcross.
Yes, in Ramsgate, doing
Yes. Yes. So that was Art Inspiring Change, was the pilot, and the kids made wonderful temporary installations, which was, and they were just, I mean, wow, the life, and the ambition that they were full of. And because there was 4 groups working with 4 different artists, it was very exciting. And then so then two groups in Ramsgate working to then result in this public art piece, from which I've only seen online. Actually, I haven't seen it in person yet.
You need to come visit.
Yeah.
You need
So,
to come,
you're
come
in
back to
Ramsgate.
Kent. Yeah. Come back.
Come back to Kent.
I if what is the, if you think about your desire for change, or you know, the thing that you want to impact on, if you had kind of a magic wand and you could change something for people, what would that thing be?
I mean, I know what I kind of like to get moving, and then I think it's hard to. Well, I there's a lot of change that clearly I think most people. I mean, a lot of people can see that there's a lot of change that each of us needs, even in our everyday life. Whether it's about the energy we're using or the kind of energy we're using, you know, how do we make these things possible? Because people want to make things possible, but we need to be kind of supported in that in different ways. And of course there are pockets of support, but I think there's a big picture. I mean, I get a lot of inspiration from finding out, like, webinars, all sorts of, and podcasts about the things that are going on. I find that keeps me buoyant in a way that I often see people feeling quite depressed, because the news is depressing. And so knowing the pockets, but actually I feel now I really want to be part of connecting things up. So personally, I would like to. So a young boy in a primary school in Lewisham said to me, it was a really interesting project, and these kids are like so articulate and very familiar, which is painful, really, but with discrimination of all kinds, and they're working hard on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they know that the government isn't doing what it should, what it's promised. So they are really quite desperate. And one of these boys said to me, he must have been 10, maybe 11, just said to me, they're not listening. What can we do? How can we make them listen? And then he said, we have to stop being so kind. And I just thought, wow, that's, so I'd already been thinking over the pandemic about how do I focus where I want to make an impact. I think that continuing to go into organisations is what I'd like, but and then also separately working with young people. There's some great programs. I love that one that Asma Shah mentioned on your podcast, and also like Advocacy Academy, all these amazing self-directed, a lot of it, stuff going on with young people. And I'm living in Wales at the moment. There's some incredible groups of young people doing things. So I would like to, I'm looking into it at the moment. I'm contacting people who work with young people, talking to some young people, and I need to do more of that, about what do you need, and what can I do to help you. What I imagine I can do is share some of the kind of philosophical inquiry tools and the ways of opening up dialogue. But there's a lot of stuff around the body as well that young people need to sort of, resource them and protect them, nourish, nurture. But I also would like to be, being able to, work. Some of the organisations I work with say, look, right, okay, now how about we have a conversation with some young people, you and them, and then gradually those young people get to host those conversations. So I kind of do myself out of a job. But actually partnering up generations, I think, is really important. Also communities. But I think that would be, so people who are leaders currently, actually then talking directly to you. I'd like to be part of putting those people together.
Yeah. And the skill that you have in doing that, it's not just about having people in the same room, is it? It's not, the intention, let's put two groups of people in the room and hope that they get something out of it. It is about that. It's contracting with each other. It's about saying, this is how we're going to be in this space together. These are the kind of this isn't like, but like the rules of engagement, how we're going to work and what we want to get out of it. And that is a real skill to be able to be in that space and do that.
Well, and I think I saw the Rebellion film, the Extinction Rebellion film, the other day, and I thought it was really interesting because, it's a complex picture, the whole thing, but some of the young people had kind of split off and they said, we're into dialogue, and they set up a dialogue space in a park somewhere in London. They were thrown out eventually, but that's what they wanted to do. They didn't want to do direct action anymore, or they wanted to be having dialogue. And so there's clearly an appetite to be doing it, and people are finding their ways. But I know that there are some really key things that I think, when I do my dialogue sessions, people go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And it's like suddenly frees people up. There's some really small operations. They're kind of profound, but they allow some different things to happen. And I think, we all need to be collaborating in how can we, I said the other day when I was talking to someone, I said, tool young people up. I didn't quite mean it like that. But I meant, these are tools, but people need them. We all need them. We all need them around the dinner table, in our working lives, but also in our home relationships, everywhere. And I think that's what I want. That's the impact. So I'm just trying to do the research before kind of making some new partnerships with people, really. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk, because I think it is, they are really small things, and they seem so obvious, I think, as well. I was just thinking about active listening, that we would, if I'm going into an organization talking about how you have a more of a coaching approach in the workplace, we might talk about what it is to actively listen. And it seems so obvious. It's like, well, obviously we all know how to listen, but
Yes.
it's going back to some of those basics and understanding what we're trying to get out of this. What is the outcome of really properly listening, with your heart and your ears, and really helping people to feel seen and listened to and heard and respected. And but it is having to be quite specific about that, and
Yes.
give people the tools to enable that to happen.
And I think these are practices, they're all practices. I think that it's an interesting word, it's used in so many fields. But I think to listen without preparing what you're going to say while you're listening or not listening
Yeah,
is
yeah.
really is a skill. And actually, but you can't do it all the time.
No.
It's not for all the time. But I think that, so philosophy is about uncertainty. It's about bringing curiosity to uncertainty. Now, uncertainty is an uncomfortable feeling. And it was only when I went to study my MPhil that I put these things together and went, oh, so a lot of my confusion that I felt a lot of the time was around that uncertainty. But actually, that was a really valuable starting point for exploring and listening,
Mm.
rather than going, I've got you actually need to listen to me. I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you how it is.
Yeah.
You know,
How would things be different if you had been certain? What would your life look like
yeah.
if you'd
Well,
gone into that
yeah.
space certain?
Well, I think I had a little vision of that when I was young, and that's not what happened.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
lost my certainty. I think I did have some very briefly,
Mm,
and I lost it, and it's very uncomfortable. And I can look back now, and given all the different discourses around identity and race, etc., and I'm mixed heritage, um, which it's not that I ignored it, but I did ignore it as in terms of myself, for a long time. But I mean, I grew up with, my mum was a white South African, and she was campaigning with anti-apartheid for years, because she
oh,
was banned for 30 years. And my dad was Sri Lankan, so she couldn't have gone back with me because I'm the wrong colour for South Africa anyway, even she hadn't been unbanned. At the time, apartheid, that wasn't, it wasn't what you did. If you had a mixed relationship in South Africa in terms of colour, you could be in prison for 7 years. That was what it was in apartheid. It was brutal, and crazy. But so I grew up around all this, knowing about inequity and the cruelty and the effects of colonization, and the power imbalances. But I didn't actually think about my belonging, really. I think I felt it. And that's one thing, actually. I think that's what, over the pandemic, I've come back to the body in a way that I had split, especially with philosophy. People think of head, don't they?
yeah, yeah, of course.
And medicine, actually, people think head, body.
Mm, mm,
Um, and I've been really undoing that and reading other things and looking at, of course, indigenous cultures where they had much more of a kind of holistic sense. All the singing that people do, which is so good for your vagus nerve and trauma,
mm,
literally
mm,
all the singing and dancing that people do in places where they've been highly traumatized over hundreds of years. But these are survival
yeah.
things, survival roots. But so I've been really, yeah, so with me it's been around breathing. and beginning to realize the conversation isn't just between different heads and minds. Actually, the mind is in the body, and we need to include the body. So that's something that, and I'm, in terms of young people, as I was saying, I'm not, it's an awareness I have and a respect for that work, but I don't feel equipped to really kind of pass that on. So that's why I was thinking, like a collaborative team of people who are all learning together, not just handing things on, but learning together and really sharing some what we've found is powerful, and really building some change, because it needs to happen fast.
Yeah. And I suppose, I mean, this is a question I ask everyone, every guest on the podcast, but I suppose what you're talking about, connecting to the body and thinking about your experiences, thinking about where you want to be heading, what you want to be helping. When you hear that phrase, do good and do well, then what does that mean for you?
Well, coming from a philosophical thing, I go, oh, what's good? The problem
Yes,
about
yeah,
good
exactly.
is that it's just twinned always with bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's been interesting in my work is, because, there's been lots of conversations about what is safe. There's nothing safe.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, there's risks. How do we take risks? But also about safe enough. I found out Donald Winnicott, I think he was a psychoanalyst, used that term to sort of open up the possibility of parenting as being a good parent without being the perfect parent. So really giving some play in these ideas, rather than, oh my God, I've got to get things down this line, and where's the point that I'm meant to be, and I've just gone off it, fallen off it, because it's a knife edge. So it's that, good enough. So I think I kind of like that, bring it out. And I think my intentions, I just think that the do good, do well. I think the well bit is, as I said, the kind of come over the pandemic, much more like, hang on, Ayisha, let's get this sort of in the picture. Not get this bit sorted. I nearly said that.
Get it done. Fix it.
Actually, hang on. Yeah. Well, also those words, fixing things, and so a lot of sensing and bringing the inquiry to the body, actually, is what part of doing well is become for me. And also listening in a way that it's like, well, how do I need to adapt to things? I think that's part of the do good, do well. I find it very hard to encapsulate that, but I'm already in, I think that since I did my master's training, I've been in the right stream for me.
Yeah.
With an intention to really help people feel supported enough to take risks with how they think. And that can go for any setting, and it can be powerful in any setting. Kind of. I do think we need some serious shifts in how we operate, economy-wise as well. But I think, we kind of, there's so many assumptions we make when people are acting so fast and needing to work so fast, so many expectations on people that people just kind of keep in the same loops without having the time to sit back and go, is this how it has to be? And actually, this point of uncertainty at the moment, and that word is everywhere, it's a real opportunity for big business as well as, grassroots, all of us young people, to get into the picture. That's what we used to do in the galleries, put ourselves in the picture. And I actually think I used to edit myself out a lot, funnily enough. So the body's bringing me back into the picture, my body. I'm really interested in. There was a beautiful quote from Einstein, actually, that I wrote in one of my kind of follow-ups to something, which is, it's an illusion that we're separate. Now, there's so many people who will say this, and so many traditions and cultures, and I think it's really helpful to see it in different places in Ubuntu. African Archbishop Tutu's granddaughter wrote a book about everyday Ubuntu, and that is about you are a person through other persons. So you are connected, and you cannot be an individual operate. So I think the more I do good and do well is what I'm finding out is trying to apply that and trying to apply it to how I think.
Yeah, and I think what I've noticed, some of the things you've said then about, I think I edited myself out, and and I needed to adapt, and talking about this, people are in a loop and we're going round and round and round and round, and actually we need that thing, going back to what you said at the beginning, like, how do we slow down, how do we stop, how do we recognize that actually maybe we're not the ones, you're not the one that needs to adapt, maybe the structures and the systems need to be adapting, and taking that time out to think about how can we do things differently, how can we reinvent or re-establish, bring in the new, create new ways of thinking, new ways of bringing people together. I just so often see, particularly the people that I'm working with, that sense of I need to adapt and twist and shape and contort myself so that I fit into, and I think particularly for I'm thinking about freelancers specifically as well, because we're out of those organizations somehow. We've got, which is, and it can be a real advantage, but I think there's also, it can be harder then to find your way in, like that roundabout you talked about earlier, and then you're kind of having to twist,
let me on or let me off.
Let me
I go let me on, other people go let me
off. Or you get on straight away, and then you're like, oh no, this is what I want.
Now get me off. Well, yes, exactly. Well, I thought, I mean, a lot of talking cures are about how do I change myself to fit in, and I think that literally, I mean, I agree. I was suffering from that for a long time, and it was it's a model, but it's also keeps a status quo. I mean, I remember Oliver James, a psychologist, back in the 80s, saying, the reason that lots of these really high-powered yuppies, it was at the time, are so in crisis is not because they're failing, it's because this system is failing us as humans. I mean, and obviously people have been saying things for many years, but I just remember him saying that on the news in the mainstream. And I'm very interested in how do we get some of the really interesting, challenging to the status quo ideas more into the mainstream. It's partly through scientists. The idea, because in neuroscience now it's much more accepted that knowledge is not all cognitive, it's also in the body, and that the systems of thought and emotion and feeling are entangled. And these models of separation that we have that can become responsible for some terrible things in the world just don't stand up. And that's through science. That's very useful. And also the idea of what's possible. So I think in conversations as well, when people shut it down, go, oh no, well, that's not possible. It's like, what if it was? Actually opening up. What do we know isn't possible? It's bring the uncertainty to all the things that we think we know. I mean, and scientists are some of the most uncertain people, actually, interestingly, and highly creative, really inspiring. But if we don't get that shared with us, that's not the narrative for the public. So I think, there's a real... So when you were just talking, I was thinking, the really exciting thing is the thinking 7 generations ahead. Because there's this Roman Krishnarit, I struck with his name, sorry Roman, public philosopher. He's got a book called The Good Ancestor, and he's drawing on lots of indigenous cultures where everything was about 7 generations ahead, otherwise it didn't have meaning. And it's like,
Mm.
wow, you suddenly go, okay, what are we going to make? I mean,
Mm.
literally make from what we're going to, how all the waste that we make from what are we going to eat, how are we going to create this space? Because at the moment, I heard him on one of his podcasts, and I can't remember who it was, but this guy said, we need to decolonize the future. And some people go, well, what do you mean? There's no one there. But there is. That's the
Yeah.
point. We need to think about people who are there in the future. And I think those are
Mm.
some of the conversations that would be really interesting with young people hosting with
Mm.
leaders at the moment. I'd like to be part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds really important. I don't know if that's such a rubbish word, but like just
Yeah. And
it
exciting.
and
Your reaction then, it's like,
exciting.
oh my God, everyone could get excited about that.
Yeah. Well, I think also it's hard, isn't it? Because on the one hand, uh, so my kind of philosophy is that I agree, we have to be thinking about what our impact is on, in the world right now. And I love that idea, thinking what will our impact be in 7 generations, and also recognizing what's in our control and what's not within our control. And I think sometimes the weight of that kind of idea can keep people stuck,
Mm,
because they we can't necessarily see how our imaginations can perhaps see it, but then our rational brain starts to go, yeah, but how exactly are you going to do that? How are you little you gonna kind of make that difference? And so I think there's something about having these really big ambitions and visions, and really thinking about, in this ideal world, if I did have a magic wand, what would this world look like? That's the
yeah.
world that I'm aiming towards. And I can't do it in a day, and I can't necessarily do that by myself, but I can take these actions every day in the way that I think, that maybe the way I behave, the people that I surround myself with, the blogs that I write, the
Mm.
tweets that I send out, what are the things that I can do right now?
Well, and you're
Um,
making me think, actually, I really need to share more often the things I find out about that give me inspiration and keep me going, having hope
yeah,
more,
yeah, yeah,
as just because actually we all need to know those things because they do give us hope. We do need hope and energy in order
we
to carry
do.
on with these visions.
We do. And also, all the people that I work with have that they're just so that they come with such positive intention, and have this expertise, but are also often very grounded and really curious and want to learn, yet keep their thoughts, opinions to themselves, because why would anyone
Yeah.
want to listen to me? What have I got to say? And part of
Yeah.
this is why I want to do this podcast, because I want different voices on here really being able to say, this is what I believe in, and this is what I
Mm,
care about, and this is what matters to me, and these are the things that inspire me, and this is how I want you to feel inspired. And um
mm.
there's
And
not
yes, absolutely. And I think that part of that is, well, I mean, I think the people who've been working I'm not sure about all of the freelancers who work with you, whether most of them in arts and culture, they probably
yeah,
are they?
mostly, yeah, yeah.
Because I think that world, my experience of that world is that there's so much that world can bring
Mm,
to the kind of economic world that we see. I mean, there's different economies, aren't there? But the way that to make our world more sustainable, to have our creative kind of thinking in industry as well as, I mean, there's, of course, it exists in some places, but I think, there's a lot of businesses who want more collaboration, but they don't know how to do it. And actually, artists have been doing it for years.
yeah,
and and thinking about it. And there's lots of really interesting stuff around how people can organize themselves and experiment and take that risk, but then also review, and how to make those systems work, how to make decisions without it being together, but not taking weeks for it
Yeah.
to come to consent, about the same thing, the kind of death by committee or death
Yeah,
by
yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
There's people working on these things, and building tech actually for them, which is really
Mm.
interesting. And we more of us need to be using it. But
Mm.
so yeah, I think you've just given me. I'm just going to share more of the things I find on. I mean, I do by word of mouth, but actually, that's not the biggest
Yeah, yeah.
effective thing, is it?
No. Um, it's
We've got.
it's so fascinating talking to you, and I know I say this on every episode, but I feel like these episodes could be about 4 hours long, and I have to stop them at some point. What I was going to say then, so if you're going to be sharing more of this amazing inspiration and your thoughts on things, where can people find you? How do they find out more about you? How they can work with you? How they connect with you?
Well, I think probably LinkedIn
Hmm.
would be the first port of call. I've also got a website, the Conversation Agency, .co.uk. I'd say those. An email, which is Ayisha at theconversationagency.co.uk. Ayisha is Ayisha. Yeah, I'd love to hear from people. I'm really interested in collaborations and what we can each bring to a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just being explorative, I think. Yeah.
Mm.
So, and unlikely communities, I had just heard that term from an artist, and I thought I quite like that.
Mm.
There's a lot of assumptions in what we think of as communities, and moving beyond those assumptions as well. So yes,
Mm.
I'd be very excited to hear from
Okay.
anyone.
Cool. Thank you so much. I know there was a lot of stuff we haven't even touched upon. But I really do urge you all to go and check out Aisha's website and have a look at her, connect with her on LinkedIn, because she is brilliant. Thank you very much. Take very good care. Bye.
Thank you, Sarah. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.